We've got a fascinating NFC South Week 1 matchup here between Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers and Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. Panthers are trying to bounce back from an atrocious year, and the Saints are trying to keep trying to find that genie in the bottle here, and they're hoping that Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, and company can kind of reignite what Drew Brees had started in New Orleans during his tenure there. It's going to be a great game. Ryan and I, we are going to break down both matchups here that are going to be important for both teams to win. And at the very end of the video, we are going to provide our prediction. But before we get into that, if you have not already, go out, help out the channel, and subscribe to the Tracy Take. And while you're at it, leave a comment and a like, and let us know who you think is going to win this game. Ryan, Panthers really could not have had a worse season in 2023. Is maybe not rock bottom. I guess maybe 0-17 would have been rock bottom, but they're definitely looking. I can't really get much worse than last year. So what are some of the areas you think that the Panthers and also the Saints have improved on in the offseason that can help them out be victorious today?
Yeah, I mean, for the Panthers, I feel like the obvious one is the skill position player room. Going out, added Jatavian Sanders at the tight end spot. Then you go get Deontay Johnson and Xavier Legette and add that to the receiving room. I think that is a couple really nice additions. You have Jonathan Mingo, your second-round pick from last year as well. So you should have 3 young receivers that can come in and hopefully be impact players, as well as a promising tight end. They did add Robert Hunt, too, for Miami to hopefully help improve the interior of that offensive line. So, we'll just kind of have to see what this offensive line turns into. Sometimes it takes a few years for those guys to kind of get things together, just get the chemistry correct and whatnot. So, all in all, I think that skill position player room on the offense and maybe that offensive line should definitely be improved in 2024. And for the Saints, I'm not going to lie, they didn't have a ton of draft picks. They definitely didn't have any money in free agency. And they added Tulise Fulanga in the draft, so maybe that offensive line will be a little bit better. But man, I think this is a team that has really struggled since the loss of Drew Brees. They haven't really had the ability to go out and get high-profile free agents. They haven't had a ton of draft capital, and I think the Saints are in a even scarier spot than being a really bad team. I think they're just in the cycle of mediocrity where they have some good players, but not enough to really be a Super Bowl contender, but they have enough good players to beat up on teams like the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing I was leaning towards in the intro. Was it just seems like they're just constantly still searching for that genie in the bottle, just kicking the can down the road until they finally blow things up. But to your point, though, I mean, Alvin Kamara was drafted in 2017. I know that's young. I mean, I think he's my age. That's at least when I graduated college. So, but he's 29. But for running back, that's getting up there in age. Cameron Jordan, who's probably one of the better Saints players, I think, in their franchise history. One of them, just with his overall tenure there. Drafted in 2011, so his time is eventually coming up here as well. They do have some other younger, good talent, like Chris Olave, who they've drafted. I do like that A.T. Perry's going to be the number 2 receiver as well.
Rashid Shaheed is a good drafted free agent find, as a speed deep threat.
Yeah, they have some other good younger guys, and too, you mentioned that their offensive line. Several of their starting offensive line members are on the younger side. It's Tulise Fulanga, as you said. So they're in an interesting spot here, and it's all being led by Derek Carr, who's now kind of turned into just a mediocre style quarterback, I would say. So it's going to be interesting to see here, as the Panthers are definitely on the up and up, while the Saints, I think, are at minimum going to be staying status quo, probably going to be in that 7-10 to 9-8 type range this season. And so let's get back to the matchups here in a second, but let's also take a look at see who is favored to win this game according to the betting odds. And so if you do like to put a couple bucks down on some NFL games, especially Saints games as well, check out the link down below. BetUS has a bunch of great promotions going on right now for first-time players here. And even to their odds as of right now of this game, the Saints are 4-point favorites with the over-under at 41.5. I do think that is actually going to be a fair over-under, especially for this team here, because I think the Panthers went scoreless in their final 2 games last year, and the Saints, their Saints offensive numbers last year I felt were a little bit misleading because I felt they got a lot of garbage time points and yards and touchdowns. There were several games I remember watching where they're down 3 scores going into the fourth quarter, and then they get 2 touchdowns. It's just because the defense starts playing a different style of game. And I think that's just kind of the bugaboo for the Saints. And frankly, also, too, this could also apply to the Panthers, even though they have a bunch of unproven talent that they keep bringing in, and they just need to keep growing as well. But going back to the Saints, there's just an overall limitation. They don't have the best offensive line. Talise Fuaga was a great pick. I think it's a massive improvement. But really, I know we talked about Rashid Shaheed. I know I mentioned A.T. Perry, but they're still not elite number 2, number 3 receivers. I think like they're serviceable for now, but the receiving room isn't as great after Chris Olave. Because Chris Olave is a great receiver. Alvin Kamara is phenomenal, but he can only do so much as the running back. Juwan Johnson is a solid tight end as well. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they're solid, but they're not great. They do have, I think, a decent secondary led by Marshawn Lattimore. They have a couple other guys that are that are solid, such as Paulson Adebo, and then they also have Tyrann Mathieu as well, who is just the honey badger. I mean, he's seems like he never ages, and he's always just a stud. It seems like every year. So, yeah, but to your point, though, they just have a lot of good veteran players that can beat really bad teams, like maybe how they'll do against the Panthers here. But then when they go up against a superior team like the Falcons, no, I'm just joking. But against a team like the Niners or like the Packers, they just struggle, it seems like, to come out victorious in those matchups on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel coming into this season for them is I think like this offensive line should be okay. It's not going to be great. I don't love Trevor Penning. I think that experiment has largely been a failure. I like some of the offensive weapons. I like Chris Olave. I do think, and this is going to be a very controversial take for Saints fans, he wins down the field really well, and he's a really good route runner. But I don't view him as a true number 1 wide receiver because I think he feeds off the fact that they have to play like Alvin Kamara. I don't view him as much of a coverage dictator as you go and see like a Brandon Ayuk or a CD Lamb. I don't think he's quite in that mold. And don't get me wrong, he's a very good player. I just don't see him as an elite receiver in the NFL.
And I can see what you're saying too, but also to defend Olave a little bit is I think defenses know, be like, okay, we got to cover Kamara, and then we got to cover Olave. Outside of that, though, there's not really that much,
and that's
overall overall concern in that category. Yeah. Unlike, I will say, if these on the Panthers side now, as kind of moving to them, if they did hit on Leggett, if they did pick up, and Deontay Johnson's able to be a solid veteran receiver here, then you still have Adam Thielen, who was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. There are a couple of there's enough pieces there where if these guys can all mesh well together, I could see defenses really being concerned with this receiving trio here. And then also concerning as well then too, you do have Chuba Hubbard in the backfield, and then when Jonathan Brooks gets healthier, it's going to be another solid running back. There's a little bit more optimism, I think, on the Panthers receiving room overall compared to the Saints. Now, that also is saying as well, too, because we haven't seen Deontay Johnson play with Bryce Young yet. We haven't seen Xavier Leggett play in a real NFL game. And so there's still a lot of question marks. But if those do hit off, I could see this receiving room being better than the overall sum of the Saints receiving room.
Yeah.
You know, Chris Olave is the best receiver amongst everybody.
No, I agree with that.
But that's where it kind of goes back to the Saints. Curious to see how they end up, what they end up doing this offseason, because if they go 7-10 again, like maybe they'll try and kick the can down the road again. If they go 10-7 and win the division, maybe not. But if they go 4-13, then they might blow it up, get a full rebuild going here, and move on from a lot of these veteran pieces. When it comes to this game specifically,
hold on, I want to wrap up my point on Chris Olave because I think
go ahead.
I view him in the same light as I do like a Calvin Ridley, where I don't know if Calvin Ridley will ever be a true number one on a team. He's just a very, very high end complementary number two.
Yeah.
I think is the best way I can put it.
Yeah, no,
So.
and I think that's a fair. I think that's a fair comparison. So when it comes to this game, and I also want to hear your prediction with this as well. But what's the one thing both teams really need to focus on to come out victorious in this game?
I think keeping Bryce Young clean for the Panthers, I think is going to be really big. I think last year he was running around with like a chicken with his head cut off because that offensive line had more holes in it than the U.S. and Mexico border. Like that is it was so bad. So I think keeping him upright, and if I'm the Saints, I want to get the ball in my playmakers' hands as best I can. Get the ball to Alvin Kamara, get the ball to Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson, and really spread out this this Panthers defense because they don't have a ton of great talent. Like they signed Jadeveon Clowney, who has just kind of been a journeyman edge rusher. They still have Derek Brown, who's a good defensive tackle. Caleb Chason has largely been a bust throughout his career. They have J.C. Horn and a few other guys in the secondary, but nobody I think that's like a really elite coverage guy. J.C. Horn is a good corner, but outside of him, I think they don't really have anybody. So really spreading out this defense and making it hard on them to kind of predict who's going to have the ball, I think is going to be really big for the Saints.
Yeah, and that was going to be the point that I was going to make with my prediction because I am going to go with the Saints in this one and kind of a low scoring, maybe like 17-14 type game. But it's, to me, I think moving on from Brian Burns, if they still have Brian Burns, I might think about this a little bit longer. Yeah. But moving on from Brian Burns, they don't really have that electric kind of edge rusher, to really stymie this offense here. And I think it's going to be a lot of check down passes to Alvin Kamara. There's going to be a lot of play action rolling out to Chris Olave. You still have Juwan Johnson, who's a pretty big red zone threat as well. And as we mentioned, the two, like the A.T. Perry and Rashid Shaheed are still good enough. I think to create just enough opportunity for the Saints to move the ball down the field. This is going to be a low-scoring game. I believe there's going to be more optimism out of this game for the Panthers offense than the Saints offense, in my opinion. Yeah. But since it's week one, I think the Saints are going to be able to come out victorious in this matchup here.
Yeah, I have the Saints coming out ahead as well. I just think they're going to be a better, more experienced team, especially in week one while the Panthers are still trying to find their identity under a new head coach, Dave Canales. I favor the Saints slightly in this matchup. So we're both taking New Orleans. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel. While you're at it, leave a comment down below on who you think is going to come out ahead. Will it be the New Orleans Saints? Will it be the Carolina Panthers? None of that. We'll see you guys next time.